Afua, thank you for joining us today on the doctor journey. Thank you for taking the time, out of your busy schedule.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell the audience a little bit about who you are, where you go to, a little bit of that.
Sure. My name's Afua, and I'm a third year medical student at Case Western. So I'm in Cleveland. I originally went to Tufts University for undergrad. I was in Boston for a bit, and then worked for a healthcare startup for a couple of years before going to med school.
Wow.
Um, and so, yeah, that's a little I guess, like the high level review about me.
So you did a healthcare startup for a couple of years?
Yeah. It was called Devoted Health, and they have kind of their own internal medical group that they see their own patients. It's a Medicare company, but they see their own patients internally as like kind of their own clinic. So I was working on some operational and roles there and building some clinical like spaces and workflows for their medical group.
Wow, that's great. That's
Yeah, it
great.
was a cool experience.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about of how was your journey from going from undergrad to med school? What was that transition like? Did you take gap years, etc.?
Yeah. Long and short of it was like very chaotic. I graduated right like in 2020, so peak or like the beginning of the pandemic. And I think everyone who graduated 2020 had the same thing of like, do I go to grad school or like do I try to get a job?
Yeah.
So yeah, I applied to both, ended up going with the job route. And so I kind of knew I didn't want to work in like a basic science lab. Um, I also like was living in Boston and like basic science like salaries in Boston are like not sustainable for the cost of living there.
Yeah.
But I also just knew I was someone who was debating if I actually wanted to go to med school or not.
Mhm.
So I'd been pre-med in college, but like I felt like I was really interested in public health, but also potentially like health innovation or like the business side of medicine. So I wanted to work in that kind of like area for at least a year or two just to see like how I felt about it. And if it was something that really called me, then I was okay, like not going down the clinical route. But I also wanted to just give myself the opportunity to explore just to make sure before taking on something like med school, of course.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So I worked for 2 years. I ended up taking the MCAT twice within that time. So I took within 2020 to like 2021, I took the MCAT twice,
Uh-huh.
and then I applied to med school in 2021, and then started in 2022.
Wow. Okay. For the audience, tell them about how you had so many options. How'd you get into so many schools and, a little bit of your highlights.
Yeah. You're probably guessing a little too much, but yeah, I think for me it was like I'm like very like everything was like in a spreadsheet or I was very like detail oriented. So I think for me, honestly, was day one, like when things were open, like I would have the application in. So I pre-wrote all of my secondaries. And of course when the secondaries came out, there were a few, different ones that I didn't have, but I was able to edit those very quickly and get those in. So I think pre-writing my secondaries was something that was really big because, if something opened at 9 o'clock, I'd get home from work, just double click, just review everything, make sure it looks good, and then hit submit the same day. And
Uh-huh.
so I actually got all my interviews really early. So because of that, I think by October, I'd gone most of my interviews. So I think I'd gotten like 15, 16 interviews by then. And then I only got like one more interview down the line, further down the line after the new year. So for me, that was really nice just because it helped like take the burden off of, like
Yeah.
scrambling at the last minute and be like having to send emails to be like basically like begging me like to interview. So I am really grateful for that. And I do think it was because I submitted so early and I was able to pre-write all the secondaries because secondaries are a ton of work. So pre-writing all of them and having those down, like I was done applying by July, like end of July. So, and that included all of my secondaries.
So did you apply right? Like, did you submit the primaries right when it opened up?
Yeah, the primaries, I can't remember exactly I know AMCAS like there's a certain day that schools actually like start to look at the applications. And I know that I had mine definitely in by like that my application was done and like verified and everything by that day. So I feel like if not one of the first like the first day, it was probably one of the first days that I did submit, just so that my application had time to get verified and then like your school, your undergraduate has to verify some stuff on that end too. So all that stuff is administrative lag that you don't want to work against you. So I know I had all of that done and ready to go so that the first day schools could download applications. Like my application was there and ready to be looked at.
Okay, so got it. So for clarification, you had everything, including MCAT, all done before this, right?
Yeah. So my first MCAT score was done. My second MCAT score, I want to say I actually got it right around that time. I think when I was actually writing like my personal statement, things like that, I didn't have the score back,
Mhm.
but because I took it again in May of 2021. And so I don't think I had my second score back, but it was probably by the time I had secondaries, I definitely had my score back by then, I'm pretty sure.
Got it, got it. And then when you say pre-writing secondaries, like kind of explain what do you mean? Did you go through all the places you applied and wrote them down beforehand?
Yeah. So it's a lot of work, but yeah, I had a big Google Doc and I wrote down like all the schools I was applying to. And there's a website, I cannot remember the name of it, but I pretty sure I just Googled like secondary application, prompts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote all those down and I kind of just tackled it like day by day. It was just like one day I would do, whatever school after I finished with work and just write that one essay. But honestly, after you get to like 10 schools, like all of the essays are pretty much the same, like with different like word count and like different school name, obviously. So definitely after like a couple weeks of that, it got pretty easy just to like use the same outline from each essay that I wrote and like, kind of adjust it.
Mm-hmm.
I also like was really intentional about like pulling things from the school website just to make sure that I was like not just talking about myself, but talking about how I could be a contributing member to XYZ thing at a school or how I would, really like to use XYZ thing out of school to benefit my personal trajectory in medicine as well. So I definitely pulled in like unique characteristics from each website for each school that I was applying to.
Wow, okay. That's great. That's great. So did you have like the really good stats also going in, or like what were your stats comparative to the averages of the schools?
Yeah, I think my stats were honestly a lot lower. So for to preface, I played tennis in college, and I think, but I only played for the first like 2.5 years. So the first 2.5 years, I feel like my grades like definitely showed that I had other like priorities, and they weren't like horrible grades, but I don't think I was like the star student by any means. And then once I had more time after I stopped playing tennis. You could definitely say like I had an upward trajectory. And then of course like everything went online with COVID. So then like grading kind of just was like a little bit easier, I guess, the senior spring. So I kind of got lucky there.
Okay.
But I definitely, I mean, regardless, I was still like on a good trajectory before COVID hit to, still like do well. So yeah, I think like my stats were very average. That was like the one thing about my application I was really nervous about. Like I feel like I'm a decently good writer. I felt like once I got interviews, I'd be able to speak to people and like kind of convince them why I should be accepted and kind of tell my story. But yeah, GPA was very average. Science GPA was also like average or below average. And then MCAT was also not like the proudest thing of I could say. So yeah, definitely like very average student and like not like
That's
I worked for admissions for case or like I was like one of those people that like screened things or like voted on the admissions committee and the
mm.
scores like people are getting now like are way higher than the stuff I was getting. So yeah.
Do you think your success came down to like your interviews, your application? What do you think actually made you stand out?
I think for me, it's a little bit of both. I think like one thing about me is I'm very like I feel like I've done like a lot of different stuff. I've been very well rounded in terms of like I've done a lot of community work. Like I started a nonprofit right after COVID to do like more like kind of like social justice work in my hometown.
Mm.
And then I also have like my tennis side, like my sports side, and then just my general interests. So I think I have like a little bit of everything in terms of like different things I can talk about. I think I can connect with most people, at least on a couple things just from my life experiences, which is nice. But then also just learning how to put your story together coherently, I think was something that I really focused in on when it came to interviews because especially knowing that I had like lower stats, I wanted to be able to leave a lasting impression on people, like in a good way, of course and
Mm.
kind of help them build a story that was more than just my stats for them. So I think both helped me, but definitely had to work a little bit harder on the interview side just to make sure that it came together.
Got it, got it. Okay. Well, for someone like you and their similar shoes, gets accepted to a bunch of schools, what actually made you like narrow down what to get into?
Yeah, I was like a crazy spreadsheet person again too. I think some of it was just doing the typical like reading on Reddit or like Student Doctor Network, like about people's experiences at schools. Other things I did narrow down just to like straight up like location. Like some things I was like, if between two schools, if there's one location I liked better, that was more suited towards me, I would just go through with that. And then eventually came down to things like grading at schools. Thing about Case Western is that we have exams like very sparingly.
Mhm.
And like the exams aren't just like they're not graded in terms of like a number score. We kind of get just like a meets expectation, doesn't.
Sure.
So for me, I liked the flexibility of not having an exam like every other week or every week, just because like it just allowed me to explore other things other than just the curriculum, do some research, and then also just let the material sit a little bit longer for me, which I think has always been something that like has worked with me in terms of learning.
Mhm.
So that was something I looked at.
Okay.
And then I reached out to students, honestly. I'm a part of SMA Lambda at Case. And so I reached out to, I think, honestly, just their Instagram or email or something. I just was like, hey, like, I'm an accepted student. Like, can I talk to someone?
Yeah.
And I talked to a few students, and that's kind of how I deciphered, between schools. I did that for a couple of different schools once I slimmed it down, I think, to my three that AMCAS makes you choose.
Yeah.
And then from there, that's what I did.
Oh, cool.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool, cool. For pre-meds, in a similar situation again, like you, maybe not have the greatest stats, but like, what is your number one advice to people like when they're applying for med schools?
Don't close the door before it's closed for you. I think my parents always told me that. And I always thought it was like my parents are Ghanaian immigrants, and I feel like foreign parents always have like these
Yeah.
like wise sayings. So I always thought it was kind of just like, I'm like, oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is a different system, like blah, blah, blah. But I actually think it's true. Like, I really did like shoot my shot in the best way possible. And I applied to a lot of schools. And some of them, like, I never even thought I would get an interview just because like my stats like did not match like at all. And I also just thought like the people they were accepting are just like way more brilliant people who have done like crazy lab things and all these things. So I think, yeah, just like put yourself in the best position to be, accepted, of course, and submit the applications early, like do all the coursework, etc., like as much as you can to the best of your ability. But I think there's, wherever feasible, especially financially, is like applications are expensive, but if you can, definitely like shoot your shot and don't say no to a program before they say no to you.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Is there any more imparting advice you'd give any pre-meds? What do you think they should know? Is there anything else?
Um, I think just live your life outside of
Yeah.
medicine is a big thing because I think a lot of like pre-meds, like obviously to get into med school there's a lot of things that you need, and like there's like that application of shadowing and volunteer work and all these things, but I think what really makes people stand out is how people like live their lives outside of medicine. And I think even when you get to med school, like that separates a lot of people, just because you can tell who's really spent their whole life just trying to get into med school,
Mhm.
and they haven't done anything else besides that, versus people who definitely have their passions and their interests, and they have things they're interested in outside of medicine, because I think that those things make people better doctors and it makes them more interesting applicants as well too.
On that point, how do you manage like a passion? I know everyone has a passions outside of medicine, but I feel like a lot of people get bogged down in pre-med and in med school. Like there's so much work to do. What advice do you have to people? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it's something I'm still figuring out, honestly. And yeah, like it is very demanding to be in med school or like want to go to med school, so it's not easy. But I would say like this is something like I've been told by like upperclassmen like every year of med school, is that like if whatever you're stressing out about was
Yeah.
not going to matter in like a year or like 5 years, like just stop. Like it's going to be okay. Like, so you can even like with studying, it's like if it's not life or death between today and tomorrow, like if the test is not tomorrow, like within reason, like you can stop for an hour and like go do whatever it is, like watch whatever show you want or like go play whatever sport. Like it's gonna be okay. I think
Mhm.
it's very typical to be very insular and think like, oh my gosh, I have to do XYZ like off my to-do list today. And like if I don't do my to-do list, like it's gonna break loose. And it's
Yeah.
okay, just breathe and like take a step back and like do what it is that like grounds you and then come back to your work.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for all that wisdom. I think that was great for pre-meds to learn, and even for me, just hearing your insights. And I see a common theme of people who are really successful. They ha seem to have a balance between what they actually really enjoy doing and what their goals are. And it seems like you found that balance that you had throughout your pre-med, COVID time, and after. So,
Yeah, I try to think so. Yeah, I think medicine's something that gives you a lot, but also will take a lot from you. So I think it's important to take the time to give yourself whatever you need to make sure you can get back to medicine too.
that's true. That's true. Thank you, Afua. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. I appreciate it.